Hello, everyone, and welcome to another version of our Congressional Western Caucus Chairman's Chat. We are just delighted today to have with us from the great state of Pennsylvania, Mr. G.T. Thompson. And G.T. is I don't think I have to say probably anymore, will be our chairman of the House of Representatives Agriculture Committee, and we're very honored to have him with us today. GT, welcome. Thanks for being with me.
And thank you. Thanks for your leadership.
Yeah, well, appreciate that.
Yeah, with the Western Caucus, that those, as you, you're well aware, the issues that the Western Caucus works to support. That, I mean, I'm from Pennsylvania, but those are my issues as well. So I appreciate it.
Well, I was just going to ask you that, GT. You know what? We all have our own stories. We all have different reasons for why we decided to try to do the work of the people here in D.C. What brought you to Washington all the way from Pennsylvania? What's important to you from your perspective in your district?
Yeah, well, what brought me here actually is just a commitment to make a difference in the lives of other people. Honestly, I learned that 52 years ago as an 11-year-old Boy Scout.
Wow.
It just was something that was just impressed upon me that, the very first community service project we did, which was washing fire trucks.
Washing fire trucks?
Yeah, climb around on fire trucks and wash them. And I have to say, as an 11-year-old boy, that's a pretty cool thing to do.
That would be,
right?
yeah.
Now, I got to think it's probably that it's a great thing for 11-year-old girls too. I've just never been one, so I don't know for sure. But that just impressed upon me community service, making a difference in the lives of my neighbors, and that kind of guided me 28 years in a healthcare career, guided me as a member of a school board, as a firefighter, EMT rescue technician, and everything that I did. That was the underlying life purpose I had, and so. That was my trail, my road to Congress really was to fulfill that life purpose.
Isn't that interesting? From washing a fire truck, and still that sense of community service.
Yeah, and the satisfaction with when you do it. And in terms of, my district, I like to describe myself as having, through my veins flows milk with sawdust in it. So I'm from a long line of dairy farmers. And I'm from Pennsylvania, Penn's Woods. We have more trees today than what we had when William Penn received the charter from King George. So
Really?
in forest products, I proudly represent the Allegheny National Forest, 64th in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania Forestry is 64,000 jobs. And so real proud of another issue, obviously, kind of kindred spirits with the Western Caucus, obviously.
Sure.
Importance. I have the only national forest in Pennsylvania, one of the few on the East Coast, but it is known to be, even though it's puny compared to what you all have, about 500,000 acres, but it is said to be the most profitable national forest in the forest system.
Wow. That's the beauty of the Western Caucus, of being here in Congress. We think almost we invented trees in the West, right? We've got a lot of forests, a lot of national forest, state and private property. But to hear you talk about the forest industry in Pennsylvania, that's something that a lot of us probably don't really fully appreciate. So.
Yeah, it's the home of Gifford Pinchot. He was a proud Pennsylvanian, did such a great job. In fact, after he was done serving as chief of the Forest Service, that first one, he went back to Pennsylvania to form the Pennsylvania Forest Service.
Is that right?
That was a man that worked his entire life for in the forest products, or the forestry industry.
So the Gifford Pinchot is a national forest in my state. So we have
named after a proud Pennsylvania. I appreciate that.
So, I come from the Pacific Northwest. I'm a farmer in the Yakima Valley. You've been to my district.
I've been on your farm.
Yep,
yeah,
you have.
Absolutely.
That's right. So you kind of know where I'm coming from as far as, the hops and the wine grapes and the different specialty crops that we raise in my district. So you know some of my priorities. But as the incoming chairman of the Ag Committee, What are some of the things that, I know we've got the Farm Bill coming up, we can talk
Right.
about that in a little bit, but what are some of the priorities that you're bringing to the table, some things that you want to see
Yeah, some of the
accomplished?
bigger issues. Well, I think they're probably the same things that you and your family are important to you and your family. Obviously, top of that list is to get a good farm bill done on time, not to let it expire, not to have to do extensions, but to provide that certainty. You know, for farmers like yourself, that certainty is so important going forward, right? We do a farm bill once every 5 years. Now, on top of that, we have just a lot of headwinds that are facing our farm families. Input costs, you know, the costs of
Yeah,
and the availability of fertilizer, different crop protection tools. We have an EPA that appears to be driven by politics and not science when it came to sidelining some of these crop protection tools that we have. Diesel fuel.
Yeah.
You know, our diesel reserves are probably at the lowest in history.
I think they are 26 days or something like that.
Yeah, and propane, fertilizer, and obviously natural gas. You can do fertilizer off of some of the derivatives of wet gas, and the fact that that's been artificially decreased because of some executive orders. You know, those are all things, and at the end of the day, farming is it's a business, right? So it's not so important what you get paid. It's the margin you're left with at the end of the day after you pay your bills. And I would argue almost all commodities, there's little to no margin today. And in some commodities that are really at a disadvantage because they didn't see the increase in commodity costs. And so, you know, one of my goals, and I think beyond the Farm Bill, is what you helped with actually. It's what we put into both a letter. You know, we had 93 members of Congress sign this letter, I think it was back in July. We sent this to President Biden. And the letter just outlined what the president could do with a stroke of a pen, because it was, you know, because these are problems he created with his pen on day one, starting on day one of his presidency. And so I actually wanted to include a pen in the letter. Staff said that was bad form, so you know, I didn't do that. But you know, then we turned around, and you were a co-sponsor of this HR 8069. You know, where we tried to codify and put in legislative form, you know, somewhere less than a dozen of actions that the president could do. Didn't need us because you know he did this through executive orders, through authority, which somehow he believed he has, and some extent he did have, but that didn't make it the right things to do. Right? It was, you know, it was the EPA with the crop protection tools. It was the uncertainty when we had the SEC was looking at the Tier 3 emissions and require reporting by farmers of all sizes.
Right.
You know, it was requesting to review to the expedited NEPA review that we saw back in 2020 that did not further endanger any species or anything, or any did not create environmental problems, but there was an expediency and efficiency that I think people are now asking government to be, and so we had a number of things like that. That actually, I think, will make the basis as we go into the 118th Congress for, first of all, some hearings on. Now, I'm going to have to balance getting a farm bill done and doing these other things. Because we have lots of hearings we need to do. But to do some hearings, and then as we reintroduce that piece of legislation, you know, of doing a markup and try to get that to the House floor, because that's, you know, that would help our American farmers, ranchers, and foresters.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I appreciate all that work and being inclusive. I think we're stronger, a bigger voice what we have. Yeah. So thanks for leading that charge. So one of the visits that you made to my district, we looked at, if you recall, some of the damage from some of the catastrophic fires we've seen over the last several years. And through, you know, U.S. Forest Service, Department of Agriculture, through the Ag Committee, what are some of the things maybe we can look forward to improve management of federal lands that would help to avoid some of these catastrophic fires? Anything there?
Yeah, well, I want to start with the bigger picture, because I don't think we've ever done this. I've fought for this, and I really appreciated whenever I was subcommittee chair for, that included forestry, you brought me out. I will tell you, it was an emotional visit, especially that town hall that we did at that fire hall.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, talking with that community that lost homes and businesses and firefighters.
Yeah,
young
that's right.
firefighters that
They lost lives, that's right.
That was a really an emotional meeting, and it really stuck with me how we have an obligation to do better as a nation, right? That the Forest Service, and the Forest Service sets the tempo for state and forestry, and so I think there are things we do. We need to look at additional targeted categorical exclusion authorities for the Forest Service, and these are tools that they want.
Yeah, right.
They ask for these tools, and yeah, I know that the Forest Service gets criticized, and sometimes I do believe they don't have the right people in the right place. You know, we have forest supervisors who really don't understand that what the true purpose of the Forest Service, and the original purpose of the Forest Service is, right? It was, you know, it was provide a readily available supply of timber, and make sure that our watersheds were clean, because a lot of America's watersheds start in these forests.
Oh, absolutely.
And that requires active forest management. And they have great people. I find that most people who work for the Forest Service are good people. They're dedicated, right? But they don't always have that forestry background. In fact, they rarely do today. And so certainly the workforce is an issue that we need to work on. We need to provide them with the tools like the categorical exclusions. You know, we need to look at what are some of the other resources out there. And I want to do something that really hasn't been emphasized by the committee, the forest, or the agriculture committee leadership as chair, because trees are a crop. And so they're kind of shared jurisdiction. Real proud of the work that's done with the Natural Resource Committee under the incoming chairman, Bruce Westerman.
Right.
But agriculture owns a big piece of that. The Forest Service, we provide oversight to the Forest Service. And so making it very clear that restoring a robust rural economy is one of my visions. And that we have to make sure that includes our rural counties, communities, schools, businesses, people in those areas that are within or contiguous to our national forests. You know, they've been left behind because of management that's been less than stellar in the past. Now, part of that has not been because there isn't dedicated people that want to do the right thing. A lot of it's been lawsuits, you know, by extreme environmental groups who have actually made our forests less healthy, has contributed to
Some of these
massive fires, right? 2000, you know, the four big fires the past 2 years have been huge. I think, what was it, 2017, in 2018, 10 million acres.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it just, that some of that's always going to occur. You know,
Well, fires are going to happen.
fires are gonna happen. So we're not talking about preventing fires, we're talking about building resiliency within forests, to be able to, you know, so that they're back to being a natural occurring incident and not of being these catastrophic fires.
That's the problem, that they become so, you know, the management has been such that the fires are a catastrophic nature.
Yeah,
And,
and we're never gonna fully restore a robust rural economy when we're leaving those communities behind.
Yeah,
And so I represent some of those communities.
Right,
And
right.
I've seen firsthand where, you know, even within my forest, you know, it's kind of divided into two areas, and I see the difference that good leadership makes, and harvesting. Now, we don't have massive catastrophic wildfires in Pennsylvania. In fact, some have described my forest as asbestos forest. You know, it's not like the millions of acres when we have a fire. Our big issue for massive loss of all that taxpayer asset of timber is invasive species.
Yeah, you know, born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, I never remember seeing the clouds of smoke hanging over the valleys for the extended periods of time that we see on a regular basis now.
Well, you were the guy that taught me what smoke taint was.
Yeah, right.
I was shocked to find out that there really wasn't that much of a market for wine that tastes like cigars. But you know, as a result of that visit, and the visit I've been to with you twice, which I really appreciate that. I've been to 30 different states actually since January 2021 as ranking member of the House Agriculture Committee, all about bringing those issues, those voices back to Washington to be a part of the Farm Bill. Some of the states, the larger states I've been in probably at least 3 times, each of those, but 30 different states since that time. And the things that you learn. And an example, it brought back smoke tank, and we were able to make that a part of the disaster relief bill.
Exactly, exactly. Well, so Farm Bill's coming up. That's going to be a huge part of the time that you're going to be spending working with the committee. Tell us not only some of your priorities, which you talked a little bit about, and maybe you want to expand on, but how can people, your constituents, my constituents, how can their voice be heard in this process to make sure that the concerns that are important to the farmers and ranchers and really everybody that's impacted by the Farm Bill, how can they best be heard in this process?
Yeah, let me start with that process because their priorities are my priorities, and that's why I've put all this extra time into going out and visiting and listening. You know, I've appreciated the listening sessions that you set up. Both the one when we were there, we were forestry focused, and then the last one we were there looking at commodities, right? And I still remember being it was at the Wheat Association building.
Right.
And we're sitting there along the river, and like on cue, here comes a barge down the river with weed on it. I don't know how you set that up, but that was pretty impressive.
The timing was just right, wasn't it?
The timing was just right. But let me deal with process first, and then share a little bit about what I'm hearing our priorities should be, because I want this to be the priorities of the American farmer, rancher, forester.
Okay.
And the process is we do have ways, I encourage those key stakeholders to be able to weigh in. That's why we're going to continue to we'll be doing some listening sessions around the country.
Oh, good.
Some regional ones. We haven't done any of those as a full committee.
Taking the committee on the road.
You bet.
Yeah.
But that is such an important part of this. Unfortunately, we're probably a year to 2 years behind in doing that, but when January 3rd comes, there's no excuse. We're the 118th Congress.
Right.
We've got to get started. In fact, we'll probably do the first one in Pennsylvania. You've been
I wonder why.
at the Pennsylvania Farm Show.
Oh, yeah.
The largest indoor agriculture exposition in the country, about 3 hours north of Washington. So, but we will kick off the first one up there that first Saturday in January from 1 to 3. But then look forward to taking this show on the road in different regions of the country in a bipartisan way. And then we do have a URL. There is a way, if folks go on the House Agriculture Committee website, we have an online portal that people can give input into this.
Good.
Because I think that's important. So we're going to go out and see folks. We're going to we'll have hearings here in Washington. You know, people can always submit things if they'd like to, whether it's electronically or by mail. Just input into the Farm Bill. You know, some of the things I'm hearing about is obviously we'll start with crop insurance.
Key.
Really important. We need to protect that. You know, maybe we need to see about strengthening it. Are there lessons we can learn from some of these ad hoc disaster assistance?
Sure.
And you know, about 80% of that since the last Farm Bill was outside the Farm Bill base.
Oh, wow.
And so are there some things related to disaster relief that we could incorporate into crop insurance? I think that would be really helpful if we could.
Be much more sustainable.
More sustainable and more certainty.
Yeah.
And it's which as a farmer, you know, you need certainty.
Absolutely.
And your lenders, the folks that you're borrowing from. There's, you know, I've heard some folks say that there are farmers that borrow more than in a year's time than what the average typical American family borrow in a lifetime.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, but those lenders want that certainty, that backup of crop insurance, because the weather is the weather. You know, and there's nobody more vulnerable to it than the American farmer.
Right.
So that's it. We need to learn a little bit about, I'm hearing about the Title One, mostly because of those shrinking margins. And in fact, a couple commodities are upside down right now. Reference prices are irrelevant if your input costs keep rising.
Sure, sure.
And I know we've been blessed with most commodities where commodity prices have gone up. The problem is that can drop overnight, and input costs don't tend to drop overnight.
They don't, no.
They go down very slowly
If at all,
sometimes.
that's right.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things out there that we need to be certainly be looking at. I think obviously investment in research, technology.
That's key.
Which, to deal with certain invasives, to deal with crop diseases, to deal with technology development. We still have some commodities we have to pick by hand.
That keeps our industry on the cutting edge, all of those things.
That's right. And one of my priorities, Dan, is to incorporate what defines American agriculture. Science, technology, and innovation. I want to see that incorporated into the jurisdiction in a very robust way in every subcommittee. Because that's this current status, but that's the future of American agriculture.
Absolutely.
Like the technology for harvesting. I mean, workforce. Workforce is such an issue.
Yes.
And I get it. My grandparents' generation, there were probably, I don't know, there were at least a dozen kids. My dad's generation, mom's generation was 6, 7. My generation was 3. And I think current generation is 1 point something.
Right.
So our baseline for available warm bodies, just to start with, is way different from what it was before. So we need to capitalize on that. I've appreciated your leadership when it comes to looking at agriculture workforce and helping to strengthen the reliable workforce that's out there that we can access, and we need to do all those things.
Yeah, it all come together. Well, GT, we're certainly looking forward to a great term with you at the helm of the Agriculture Committee. I think our industry will see a lot of really good results because of your leadership. We in the Western Caucus, as you know, looking forward to working with you hand in hand to make sure that we have a successful year, successful term, and successful passage of the Farm Bill, which is so key. So looking forward to partnering with you. Any last thoughts, anything you'd want to share with our viewers as we wind down here?
Well, I just encourage your input, to be at the table, and you can do that virtually. Obviously, you go on the Ag Committee website, you'll be able to see how to do that.
Oh, perfect.
Reach out to your member of Congress, because they're your representative. They're your voice and your vote when it comes to policy, including incredibly important policy like the Farm Bill. And so weighing in, let them know how important it is that they support American agriculture, they support the Farm Bill. We need yes votes in the end so that we have a good, robust vote. And quite frankly, in the end, then we wind up with food security and economic security.
Perfect. Well, GT, thank you for being on my chairman's chat for the Congressional Western Caucus. It's a pleasure. Look forward to working with you.
Pleasure's all mine, Dan. Thank you.
Awesome.